2 minutes early. 2 minutes early. The man is just on fire this morning because, frankly, I didn't want to get Bart in any trouble. Oh, different locale. Wait a second.
Yeah. Hi from Decula, Georgia.
Well, yes, and considering all of the times that I have seen you representing Archer High School.
Yes. I am about a mile from Archer.
Okay.
No longer need to represent them. We don't have any kids there anymore. The last two graduated last month, so we are done.
Well,
I joke. There were still a bunch of kids here yesterday for the fireworks display that are still at Archer High School. So
I was going to say, how was the fourth, sir? Because for those that follow you on social media, you were there as the fireworks gendarme yesterday.
Yeah, I was supervisor at the pyrotechnics display last night. I was lead engineer for about 10 years. I've gotten a promotion to supervisor. So.
Oh man! So everything went well.
Yeah, no one got burned, and all the spectators were thrilled. So
okay, so all right. So then the question of the day that I've carried over from yesterday is: there the whole Joey Chestnut thing? Is there a food that you, sir, could sit there and go, I think that I could eat this in a 10-minute period, and I could be, an international powerhouse in eating X food. What do you think it would be for you, or have you pretty much just left that to the young folks?
yeah, no. So this is a weird one, and I don't know if it counts, but cucumbers. It's my favorite snack. It's like the thing that I eat all the time, and I'll either like slice them and eat them, or I'll just peel a whole cucumber and just eat it.
Okay.
So I would say probably a cucumber. I would do a really good number on a hot dog as well. Like those, I think I could put down some hot dogs.
Okay.
The hot dogs have been a staple in my family for my entire life. That was very much a West Virginia thing. My parents, we've always been hot dog people. So
Okay, just checking because it's just one of those fascinating things where you sit there and you go, how can these people with their retractable jaws and everything sit there and make sure that all of that happens and they don't get like violently ill,
I mean, if only our best athletes would play soccer and not eat hot dogs.
Yeah, I never saw that
Yeah.
cast around yesterday. All right, Gold Cup, and we now know who the United States is playing next. And familiar foe. And first off, I mentioned that over 25 goals in the 4 Gold Cup matches last night. Costa Rica and Martinique thought that they were playing the first set at Wimbledon.
Yeah.
Finished up at 6-4. Panama and El Salvador 2-2 in Group C.
Yep.
And then the chaos in Group D, and saying it was chaotic was, I think I'm probably being nice to chaos by saying that Group D was chaotic yesterday, because it ends up being a 5-goal madness at Red Bull Arena. It's amazing what happens when people actually find Harrison, New Jersey, and sit in seats. Amazing atmosphere.
I was told that there's no possible way to get to Harrison, New Jersey in that stadium. That's just what I've been told. You can ask your friend Dylan, who comes on next, but I was told that it is impossible to get to Harrison. It's actually like Wakanda. Unless you know where it is, it doesn't exist.
Been there, found it, but had trouble getting an Uber out. So that was how it was for me. Guatemala, Guadeloupe had pretty much everything that you could have asked for in a last match day. Back and forth action, people doing math, people running onto the pitch, things being thrown at people. Yeah. That one was crazy last night in Group D, and then Canada took care of business and took all of our hopes and just threw them in the garbage. So Group D was so much fun yesterday.
Listen, I think the drama personally was watching. I mean, obviously the Guatemala match was an incredibly dramatic match, and that was a lot of fun. The stadium full of Guatemalan fans. Just that is the perfect showcase as to why the Gold Cup is hosted in the U.S. every 2 years. I don't think it should be every 2 years. But that's why the U.S. hosts it all the time, because you're not going to get that outside of Guatemala and really any country in CONCACAF, and it's pretty special.
Yeah.
But the drama for me was watching Canada hold on against Cuba. I mean, this Canada team is really in a bad run of form, and Cuba's not bad. Don't try to get me wrong, but like that's a team that a Canada team that if Canada wants to pretend, if they keep saying that they're one of the top dogs in this region,
Uh-huh.
Cuba's a team you got to smack. You know, um, it's just the reality of it. You know, you can't be a top dog in the SEC and not go into Vanderbilt and win by 40. It just doesn't work that way. You can't be a top dog in CONCACAF and not beat Cuba, who struggles to keep their teams together for obvious reasons.
Yeah. Was it 4 players that
Yeah, I think it was 4 this time.
decided that they were kind of done with the whole thing?
Yeah, which I get it. I'm not criticizing them, but that was let's be real honest. Canada is going to be an interesting, possibly very tough matchup for the U.S. because they've been really bad this tournament. And you know, I'm sure that you can blame it on some number of not having the ability to train or recover or whatever at whatever capacity that finances will allow. But that team out there, that squad shouldn't be struggling this badly, especially when you consider the fact that you've had a coach there for 2 cycles now, and a bunch of their top players are still playing in this tournament, and that's the scary part if you're the U.S. But that's also the part that is shocking at these performances they put in. They've scored goals though. I'll give them credit. They've been scoring goals.
Yeah, but you got to score goals against the competition. As you say, you gotta thump folks that you gotta thump. So you got to score goals in that
Right.
group to make sure that you get out of that group in one piece.
They did. They did survive. It was tough for the Canadians. So weird. Addie, I don't know if that grandfather clock works. I got to be real honest. But I will show you. I'll show you the still winter snow scene village that's still up. So my mother's labor of love.
So then let me ask you this about your mom. Is she one of the ones that watches Christmas in July on Hallmark and things?
She doesn't do that kind of stuff. No, she just that's a lot to put up. It covers all 3 walls of that room, so she just kind of leaves it up because it's a lot. She's currently in Indiana right now as well. So
she's got that room squared away. July 4th, she's in Indiana,
yeah,
and has left you in charge of everything in that house.
No, my father's here. He's in charge.
Okay.
I'm just visiting. I was in charge of the fireworks. That was my job.
All right. So we now have our survivors.
Yes.
Quarterfinal doubleheaders. And it is at Jerry World and TQL, which is interesting dynamics there in and of itself. Saturday, Panama, Qatar, Mexico, and Costa Rica. Interesting.
Yeah, the Mexico-Costa Rica match, another one where Costa Rica's been a little shaky this tournament. I think they really should be better than they are. I know that we can talk about the generational transition, and there's some old and some young, but they should be better. This is going to be a tough test for Mexico, I think, because Costa Rica's historically always played Mexico tough. And Mexico is clearly not at their peak form, although they had 2 very good first games in this tournament. I think maybe the Qatar match, I think we talked about it, was shocking. They didn't score more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be interesting to see how that goes, because I think that Costa Rica could knock them off, but I think Mexico might also finally be looking at how they can rise to the occasion. I'm curious to see how Mexico responds to the loss to Qatar. Again, the loss that felt like I couldn't figure out how they lost. I mean, it probably felt like a stab to the heart.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, that's probably not a fun joke to make at this point.
There goes the explicit rating for the morning.
I didn't curse. What are you talking about?
Coco's asking, why do we still let the nation that hosted the last World Championship to play in the Gold Cup? Don't they have their own region to play in?
Well, they're the state sponsored or the state-owned airline is the sponsor of the tournament, Coco.
Yes, as Nick says, Money with several Y's afterward.
Yeah. I don't like it. I'll be quite honest. Now, okay, let's talk Gold Cup format for a second.
Sure.
John, you remember back when it was 12 teams because, That's
because
what it was.
because I'm 700 years old. Yes.
Granted, it was only like 8 years ago, so it's not like it's that far away. So, there we go. Sorry, my computer decided to turn off. So they were at 12 teams, and that was mainly just the CONCACAF teams, because obviously, as you know, CONCACAF, we have 41 member nations. It's tough to truly get a competitive tournament with more than 12.
Mm-hmm.
They expanded to 16 because when Victor Montagnani came into power, one of his big things was to give more teams in CONCACAF more actual competitive games. So they expanded it to 16 total teams, but they could still only get 15. I'm sure they could have figured out another way, but they only got 15 CONCACAF teams, and they left the spot open, the 16 spot open for guest teams.
Wild cards, yeah.
Yeah, Qatar, obviously, as the hosts of the last World Cup, in their efforts to make people believe that they were not a inherently evil federation who withheld passports and forced people into Qatari citizenship for attending a summer camp there, decided they would sponsor this tournament, and under the guise of being Asian champions, were invited for the next two tournaments. Obviously, AFC has not had their championship yet. That's next summer. So maybe that'll change after this. I think that 15th or that 16th spot will continue to be a guest. I do hope, and I do like the fact that it is the champion of like Asia or Africa. I think that is a legitimately good thing for the federation. It raises the level of play. I think the problem is Qatar. We all understand that the reason Qatar won the last Asian Cup was very dubious and sketchy reasons. They obviously have not been able to replicate any of that success since then, and probably won't be able to henceforth. They're good enough to get out of the group in CONCACAF. But I do think that, like, if you're looking at some other potential Asian champions, adding Japan or Australia or Korea or one of the other Arab nations, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, those types of teams would definitely increase the level here in CONCACAF, and I think that's good. So we're always going to kind of have this. Well, I don't want to say always. CONCACAF could very well change their format tomorrow, but the likelihood is we're going to have this 16th team be a guest team. It just so happens that the one right now is the country that owns the airlines that sponsors the tournament.
For those that don't know, can you go back and kind of let everybody in on the dubious and sketchy when it came to?
So yeah, I think I alluded to it, is that they had a lot of, and they've done this with a lot of their sports. I remember the 2021 Olympics. Their beach volleyball team was like Qatari, but definitely not. So they basically, Qatar has done what a lot of other Arab nations have done, is host camps or training seminars or conglomerations or stuff like that for players. And basically, they came into the country to train and somehow became Qatari citizens. So Qatar used this squad that they assembled through some shady citizenship processes to create their team.
Shady citizenship processes, comma,
Yeah.
no, ...
Yeah, sure. And so they won the Asian Championship with this team, and a lot of the AFC fans were very disgusted. I think is a harsh word, but that's probably how they felt of Qatar winning this with players who aren't Qatari, but somehow now are Qatari. We all know how they kind of we all understand the laborers that they used for the stadiums that they built. It wasn't quite like that because they were treated as actual humans, but very similar in the fact that they were kind of invited and then told, "Hey, this is how you're now a Qatari citizen."
Yeah.
That's the best I can explain it.
Going back to 2019, the UAE, which lost to that country in the semifinal back on Tuesday, questioned if two members of the squad, 22-year-old Almoez Ali, a Sudanese-born striker, and 21-year-old Bassam Al-Rawi, a defender who is the son of a former Iraqi international, met FIFA's nationality requirements. Both were born outside Qatar, but would be eligible if either had a parent or grandparent born in the emirate. According to documents, and like I said, this is 2019. According to documents published on websites in the UAE, the mothers of the two soccer players were not born in that country, as has been claimed by the Qatari Federation, according to our friends at the Guardian at the time. And this is, like I said, this is February of 2019, and this might be required reading. John Bruin and Barry Glendenning were a part of all of this. To that email, let's see, published in the UAE. But ahead of the meeting with four-time winners Japan, the AFC issued a short statement to say the matter had been reviewed and closed. Did not respond to questions about how the decision was reached or if the UAE or any other party has the right to appeal the decision. Several UAE websites have suggested the case could have ended up at CAS. But, yeah, so that was how that went down all the way back in 2019. And when you bring in a head coach like Carlos Queiroz, who when he was a head coach for another national squad that was in the previous World Cup competition that was in that country that we were discussing, where he didn't want his players to make any kind of social protest. And they did by not singing the anthem in their first match, which was amazing to me. Queiroz basically yelled at a reporter and said, "How much are you going to pay me to talk about that?" So that's the kind of guy that nation has as a head coach currently as they are in this competition at the Gold Cup. So that fits, bringing in a guy like Carlos Queiroz now to be the head coach of that particular nation.
Yeah, I mean, I think just the best way to go about this is if there's something to do with Qatar and sports, it's probably shady. Just assume so until they prove otherwise. And again, I think it's very clear that Queiroz is a fairly good coach. I think we all agree with that. He has put this team into good positions, but I don't think talent-wise they're as good as they were to win the Asian Cup. And I don't think that, as we saw at the World Cup, they're actually that good. So
yeah. So that's your update about the previous host of the world competition. And the other semifinals, we spent so much time on previous world championship and teams down here. TQL on Sunday, 5 and 7:30, Guatemala, Jamaica, and the U.S. against some nation called Canada. That I think these two teams have played before.
Yeah, these are both really tasty quarterfinals because Guatemala has been pretty fun to watch this tournament. They're obviously trying to rebuild that program after I forget how many years it was of being banned / suspended.
Yeah.
Jamaica, obviously, we've talked about them, how they keep telling us that they're going to be good this time around. Trust us, bro.
We mean it. We really mean it.
We really mean it this time. I promise. But this could be a good opportunity for Jamaica because, I do think that their path to the Gold Cup final is quite easy when you look at the fact that, okay, Guatemala has been a good team, but I think Jamaica is a better team. I think they are more capable. Yeah. And then in the semifinal, a weakened Mexico team and a not stellar Costa Rica team. It's harder than the U.S.'s path if the U.S. can get past Canada, but it's a good path for Jamaica. They're playing tough teams, but I don't think they're playing in the semifinal, at least teams that are at their best. If they can get past Guatemala, they could be in that final. Guatemala, on the other hand, same thing. They could get past Jamaica, and they've got a large backing of fans behind them, which they have all tournament. That could be a fun semifinal there in Vegas. That one's going to be in Vegas. So yeah, I actually think that semifinal is going to be fun. The U.S.-Canada one, I don't know what to make of this, John, because I don't know what Canada is right now. They, like I said, they beat Cuba, but 4-2, not really, that great. They also got a penalty. They gave up a penalty, but they also got a penalty. 2 draws before that. You know, they just don't seem to be firing at the level they need to. That said, on paper, I think their squad is probably better than the US's, just based on who's playing. But the US has been operating at a very good level right now. And the last 2 games, especially, you saw a very fluid and dynamic team scoring a lot of goals, which I know, we played the island nations, but the fact is you still beat them 6-0 and 6-0. Canada had 2 island nations in their group, and they were unable to really look convincing against either of them. So I don't know. I mean, this is it doesn't feel quite like a trap game per se, but it does feel like a game that the US could possibly get taken if they're not fully up for this, and if you have a couple of bad performances. And I think it's fair to say that the winger play during this World Cup, this Gold Cup, has been bad. So you're going to need to improve there, and if you can do that, then I think a victory against Canada should be quite easy.
At Bartimus Prime 19 at SoccerForUSPod, hanging out with us to discuss Gold Cup here from the home casa, the home grounds, the OG grounds for Bart.
Actually, I only lived here. Yeah, this is not my childhood home. I'm a proud son of Snellville, Georgia, South Gwinnett High School. So
okay.
Yeah,
so,
they moved here after well after I was out of the
70,
house.
78 in the Scenic Highway. I know exactly where you are.
Yes, exactly.
All right. So when it comes to, let's do superlatives. Let's do superlatives, good and bad. We'll start. You want to start with teams' biggest disappointment, biggest surprise, or do you want to go with the U.S. squad? Biggest disappointment, biggest surprise.
Well, we can do teams because I think this is a little bit easier to run through.
Okay.
Disappointing teams, I'm going to give you 2, and it's just because they were in the final round of qualifying last time around and they didn't even make it out of the group. We're going to go El Salvador and Honduras.
Mm-hmm.
Honduras and El Salvador not making it out of their groups. El Salvador not in a tough group, but not that tough of a group to the point where you would have said, okay, now's a good time to show that you're you're ready. I don't know. That to me, especially given all the hype people have given El Salvador, is quite disappointing. Honduras, I think they're going to struggle for this next. I think they're lucky that qualifying for this next World Cup doesn't include the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. But I'm disappointed in how they've been, especially considering they were in the Nations League finals in 2021. To see them not even make it out of the group stage here is very disappointing.
So then, who gets the Bart Keeler SoccerForUSPod thumbs ups for either overachieving or taking care of business?
Guatemala. I think that's been. Winning that group against Canada, getting a draw against them, holding them to 0 goals is pretty impressive. They've been playing fun. I think the atmosphere they've provided in all their stadiums has been really cool too. So that to me is a big plus. Honestly, I think they've been. I don't want to say overachieving, probably overachieving, but they're proving that they might be a very tough team, kind of the team that we got accustomed to late 90s, early 2000s, that was always a thorn in the U.S.'s side.
All right, when it comes to the U.S. squad in and of itself, now I know that when you take 2 sets and you get a double bagel, winning two of them 6-0, 6-0. Felt like Bud Collins there for a second since we're in Wimbledon. When you go into this round of 8, who has stood out for you and who has been just, who has been something that should have been refrigerated that's hanging out in the kitchen and just went bad? Who has done well for you? Who has met expectations?
Yeah.
Who gets an S? Who gets an N? Who gets a U? We'll treat it like the old conduct cards in high school. When you got satisfactory, needs improvement, or unsatisfactory, who gets those grades in conduct for the Gold Cup so far?
So let's start with the negatives right now, because I think the 2 that have been the most negative are. Well, I'll give you 3 actually. Zendejas has been disappointing. I think a lot of people expected a lot better from him, and he's been ineffective and hasn't really influenced the game at all. The other one is Alan Zanora, who has been also ineffective. I think other midfielders have looked a lot better. I mean, when Gianluca Busio is outclassing you, I get that the competition level is different, but even Senora coming in against those teams hasn't been that great. And then I think the other one is probably Jordan Morris, who I understand has kind of been dealing with an injury, but Cade Cowell's taken advantage of his opportunity, especially that game against who did we just play? Trinidad. Sorry, yeah, Trinidad was last game. Yeah. He took advantage of that opportunities. He didn't look great against St. Kitts, but a good bounce back against Trinidad. I think those three have been disappointing, especially Morris, who I think we were expecting to still be at a good level, and not being there is very disappointing.
I thought so. Then who has? You mentioned Cade Cowell in the turnaround, especially after the one performance.
I don't think he's in he's been impressive. I think he's just been better than Jordan Morris. And when Jordan Morris has been bad, I don't know. I'm still in the camp of Cade Cowell is fine.
Mm-hmm. Fine.
I'm not quite sure what his ceiling is. He may be at his ceiling. His ceiling may be Jordan Morris, which isn't a bad ceiling. That's not what I'm saying. It's just, I don't know where his best level will end up being, but he's been fun to watch. I mean, there's that.
So who has done well? Who are your senior superlatives from the group stage for the U.S.?
I think the three that have done well, and I think we talked about this last time, Jalen Neal has been very good. And again, I think, the two defenders, actually all three of these guys are defensive players. You have to obviously caveat that with the fact that, like, the teams we're playing are not the best quality, right?
Yeah.
But they're all three very young. And they all three have a chance to contribute to the team going forward. One is also Brian Reynolds, who I think that right back position is not necessarily up for grabs by any stretch, but a position where that second spot may be up for grabs, right? I think Joe Scally has a great chance, but Joe Scally could also just be your backup left back, and we saw Berhalter take, 3 right backs to the World Cup last November, and I don't think that there's anyone who has on the left side who has shown out enough to be really that good. Caleb Wiley's not there yet, but hopefully he gets his chance. So I think that's a possibility where you can be like, okay, you can be your backup right back, where both Scally and Dest are kind of the left back options. So that's a good one for Brian Reynolds. He's been very good. And the other one is James Sands. Again, hard to kind of really tell based on the opponents we've played from a defensive side, but I think he's done a good job of keeping the offensive progression going.
All right. As we go through this and obviously continue to analyze and analyze and analyze and analyze, I know a lot of and I know that I think Christian Roldan, I think, was another one that you have not been.
I don't think about him.
You blocked him out, basically?
I'm tired of seeing him. I don't know why he keeps getting called up. He does nothing. That's false. He's actually been okay. He just doesn't do anything that I don't see why another player couldn't also get the call up and be there. I mean, especially if you're talking Roldan, like a guy like Richie Ledesma getting a chance to reinsert himself in the team, who could both play in the midfield and on the wing. I'm tired of Roldan. I really just am. I'm sorry. It's just at the point where he doesn't make us better. He doesn't.
So then, all right,
I'm sure he's really cool and the coaches love him, and that's fine. He doesn't. He's too old for that. I'm sorry. He's not good enough. He's not frickin' Megan Rapinoe, who's won Golden Ball, Golden Boot, scored goals in a World Cup. He's frickin' Christian Roldan throughout 4 Gold Cups. His only contribution is 3 assists. Stop. He's not contributing to this team. Do not bring him back to any U.S. team for the first ever. I'm sorry. I have zero need for him to be in a U.S. squad ever again.
So then, all right, all things being equal, if Major League Soccer schedule or professional schedules had no bearing on turning a roster, what roster, who would make this group better in its current context? I mean, obviously, if you can't bring in the big guns, and there were some decisions that were on the floor that could
Yeah.
have made this team better, would it have been, say, a Brooks Lennon versus a DeAndre Yedlin? That kind of a decision. What decisions in your mind could have
Yeah.
made this group better?
I think Brooks would have been a fun one. I don't know if he would have made him better, right? Because I still think Brian Reynolds is clearly at a very good level. I would have liked to have seen Keaton Parks or Richie Ledesma. I think Keaton Parks specifically is one that a lot of U.S. fans wanted to see. Now that we think that he is like this fantastic player, but if you're looking for a guy who can, there it is, Abby. You left and it went off.
I thought that was just another. I thought that was a phone call. Someone who was trying to solicit something.
I think Keaton Parks would be the one because he's at that level where I want him to show out in a Gold Cup, get that chance in a Gold Cup, because I think it's a level that would allow him to be both comfortable but also show out and get accustomed to the international game. He's also kind of that not two-way necessarily player, but a both defensive and offensive player who can help you on both sides of the ball. That would be the guy that I think would have actually helped, especially when you're talking about like a Roldan, Senora, even Busio. Like, I don't know, Busio's looked really good. That's fine, but like Senora and Roldan, I think I would have liked to seen Keaton Parks over them just to see what he can give us, because those two have kind of shown us that he can't.
Okay.
So.
All right. So, are you heading back in toward your normal abode?
Yeah, I'll be home probably. I haven't decided if I'll leave at lunch or after work. We'll see.
Okay. Well, so Bart's going to get back into the real world. What's the latest with Soccer for US POD now that the U.S. Women's National Team show has dropped?
Yeah, so we'll see if we can record this week. Obviously, the holiday threw all of our schedules off, so hopefully we can record tonight or tomorrow night. Kind of a quick recap of the group stage of the Gold Cup and talk a little bit more about Greg Berhalter and those types of things.